Greetings, Ghettofabulous Kings of War fans, and welcome to another very special episode. Please forgive the background noise you may hear. I'm actually on the road right now, which is kind of what prompted this. Well, I'm going to call it a video. I don't think there's going to be actually any video footage because I'm on the road and I've got my phone, so instead of my computer. So it will be a video with audio only. Like I said, a very special episode. But I'm on the road heading to Arkansas for the Shiloh Slaughter Kings of War tournament, and I thought I'd kind of discuss my thoughts, expectations, army lists, plan, all that kind of stuff. So that way I can look back after the tournament, see all my predictions, and see how wrong I was. An administrative note, much like Calculon, as a professional, I only do one take, with no editing. So, there may be some little hiccups here and there. I will reserve the right to use the pause feature, so I can get a drink, grab a snack, collect my thoughts as needed. And I'm sure that will be completely seamless. So, the first thing that kind of jumps out in my mind is that watching other people's tournament preparation videos or whatever, a lot of times it always struck me as odd when people would go to a tournament with an army list they had practiced very little with. It's like, this tournament's coming up, you've been building for it, and you only practice the army once or twice, and then you go to this tournament. And every army list has a lot of nuance and needs a lot of practice, you would think. So usually I do pretty well practicing and preparing myself. In this case, however, I am now in the boat of having 2 practice games prior to entering the tournament. And aside from those 2 games, because I've been deployed, I haven't played Kings of War for 12 months prior. So a little rusty. You saw, if you watched my previous episodes, one of them, which my second game I was trying to play at a time and really focus. It was basically the same list. And again, it was a very close game against the same Brotherhood opponent, so it was a good experience. I learned, I got a lot smoother, a lot quicker, and it was barely within what I expect to be the time for this event. And I think it's still going to be a challenge with this Goblin list with so many little units. But I'm trying to find whatever little shortcuts I can to speed up my play so that I can actually efficiently use all of the units I have instead of having to waste turns or waste time or suboptimally play units. So to start with, let's look at expectations. I think realistically, I'm a pretty good player. Not great, but certainly above average. But still a little rusty and with a unfamiliar, fairly complex army. I think just from my couple games, I can see where it has a few issues, but I think it has a lot of the tools needed, and we'll discuss the list in detail a little bit, but I think it has a lot of the tools needed to really give some armies fits. So I'm hoping, I think a realistic expectation is, I'm not sure if it's a 5 or 6 game tournament, I don't remember, but I think a realistic expectation is to at least beat 500. More wins than losses. I don't think winning or coming in the top anywhere is realistic. There's a couple players who are attending whose names I've seen on podcasts and things. I think play a lot, practice a lot, are very refined. I think those guys will be able to beat me pretty easily, but I think more wins and losses is a realistic expectation. And kind of as a side note, I'm hoping that I'll actually score fairly well on like the paint score. For the longest time I played Kings of War or Warhammer Fantasy, Warhammer 40K. I just really cared about the war game itself, the playing and fighting, and painting and modeling and stuff was such a chore. I hated it. I don't know, as I've gotten older, I'm starting to see the appeal of having a unique army and putting a little more time a little more work into it, a little more effort. Doing the bases up, having a theme. Yeah, so I've actually done quite a bit. I mean, for me, quite a bit. A lot of shading, inking, highlighting to try to get some depth to the models. Lots of different kind of bases, but they're all kind of on a similar theme of kind of a, I don't know, I kind of wanted to look like the goblins were attacking a farmstead. So if you've looked at a video from previously where I kind of give a quick highlight or showcase of my army, you could see there was fields with corn and pumpkin patches and kind of grassland and some fences and stone walls. So, I mean, nothing, again, incredible. My talent and skill in this is limited, as is my patience. But I put in a lot more work than I've ever done before in an army, and I'm kind of proud of it. I was actually really excited. I thought I'd have enough time to make a nice display board. And I thought, okay, I've got all these little models and units with different bits of a farmstead. I'll get the biggest, because they're magnetized on the bottom, so I'll get the biggest cookie sheet I can find, and then I can place the units on the cookie sheet. And then I went to the hobby store and bought some more corn and pumpkin and grass and fences, trees. I can make a little orchard. It's going to look awesome. And then I put all my units on a giant cookie sheet, and there's barely any room left. The army has so many units that there's no space for anything. So it kind of deflated me. And then I thought, well, maybe do I need to go out and get something even bigger? But considering tournaments I've been to in the past, oftentimes there's space issues. And this cookie sheet's already huge. I don't know if I could have a bigger tray, if there's not a lot of space at the tables, where am I going to put all this stuff? So I kind of gave up. It's just a bare cookie sheet, so I'm going to lose a few points there, but whatever. I'm hoping to get at least more than I have in the past, which has been like, you know, the basic color scores. I also put a few little enhancements. I mean, obviously, if you've seen the previous video with my army, it's got some mechanical robot-y units. Some look very new. Some I took some time and kind of damaged and put, I can't remember what it's called anymore. There's a couple of Games Workshop products for like oily, gritty, grimy stuff, and you can put rust over it, or just leave it oily, grimy, so it looks like it's leaking and old. Put some greenish kind of color corrosion on the bronze or brass parts to make it like they're corroding. So I put quite a lot of work into those. And I think the company was called Armorcast. I bought from them. They've got some like smoke plumes and some large shotgun blast kind of things, and I painted those up kind of similar to how they had it on their website, which kind of looked more like flame. In fact, my kids saw it afterwards and thought it was like an explosion or a fire, but I had it coming out of the smokestacks of the mincers and some of the little robots that are in the troll hordes, the bigger robots. And then I put the shotgun blasts coming out of the blunderbusses, and I actually magnetized those because it made the blunderbuss, the way I have it set up, already hangs over the edge, and then this long shotgun blast comes out even further, but it's magnetized so you can take it off so it won't get in the way, which is nice. So I think those kind of add a little bit of, again, color, flavor, and yeah, hopefully it'll pay off. In fact, I'm kicking myself now because at the very last thing that I saw on the page I was looking at of Armor, again, I think it's Armorcast's items, was like this goofy, they have laser blast and like maggot blast for Tyranids or whatever, shotgun blast, rifle blast, muzzle flashes, all those kind of things, little models you can stick on. And at the very end, there was like a little, I don't know, Japanese-looking schoolgirl thing or whatever with a weird gun, and it was like a hamster blast. And it was a little smoke cloud with a stream and a little hamster. I think it was just one at the end. I saw that and I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. I mean, it'd be kind of fun for modeling, I guess, but I mean, I can't imagine they sell a lot of those because they wouldn't have any use in war games. And then just a day or two ago, kind of getting my stuff ready, and I thought about it as I was looking at my wizard with critter call. I was like, that would be great. that would look cool, and it would kind of help me, and especially my opponent, kind of remember which wizard has critter call. It's the one shooting the hamster out. That would have been awesome. But maybe next time. And you know, you don't want to get, unlike the blunderbusses, the war trombones that have the shotgun shot. It's always going to be there. You know, wizards may or may not have critter call, so you don't want to make it a permanent. How do you attach it to the hand? A little harder to magnetize and still look cool. So I don't know. Maybe it was the right decision not to get. Well, I mean, again, I forgot. Maybe it would have been the right decision not to get it. But the more I think about it, it's like, yeah, I bet you could make that work somehow and look pretty cool. So maybe I'll add that in the future. So let's talk a little bit about the army list. I guess the genesis, what I was kind of working on during my free time I was deployed, was this goblin army. And the thought process behind it mostly focused on a 2,000 point army that focused on scoring units. I've never liked individuals in the game, and artillery, especially like the rock lobbers and things. Well, when I first started playing, I really liked them. As I've played more, and I've watched a lot of tournament reports, they seem too unreliable to invest a lot of points in. Some games are hot, but when you have the game when they're not hot, you see some people put 3 rock lobbers or 3 rock lobbers and then like the named rock lobber. And if they're not getting hits, especially that first turn or two, suddenly your front line is overwhelmed. You can start losing your actual combat units and scoring units, and then you're behind. So the 2,000 point army I had, no rock lobbers, no war trombones, and I don't know why, I was just never a big fan of them, so I kind of left them out. It was 3 hordes of trolls, with, you know, Brew of Courage and the Chalice of Wrath and Dwarven Ale. Okay, so those are all gonna make them stick around. Grogger's Goons, again, so now I've got 4 hordes, all regenerating. So the goal was to get lots of scoring units and to get units that could kind of stick around, especially because goblins have a lot of healing. A flag get with the healing charm, 2 wizards with drain life, 1 inspiring, 1 with the banner of the griffin, 3 mincers, and then I think, you know, some maw beast regiments and fleabag rider regiments, and maybe a horde of spitters, you know, something like that. And I painted up 2 regiments of maw beasts and 2 regiments of the fleabag riders. It's like, okay, I've got some mobility, I've got some fighting. Everything in this list is scoring except for the 3 individuals. It's a lot of, I mean, there's 5 hordes to chew through, and besides the regeneration, there's a decent amount of healing in there. The 2 drain lives and the healing charm, that's not insignificant. And the more it's interesting, again, watching other battle reports, people really like Bane Chant, and I kind of see it. I've used it before. It is good for certain armies and especially certain units. And really, when you're looking at it, at least for me, when I'm looking at it, it's kind of a twofold thing of, like, trolls. First of all, they've already got crushing 2, so I'm very infrequently going to need Bane Chant on them. I mean, there's a lot of toughness 5 and even some defense 6 stuff, but there's a lot of 4 and 3 stuff out there too that don't need it. But more importantly, I think, is how many hits is this unit going to get to begin with? How many hits are actually going to benefit from an increase in crushing strength? And with trolls, 18 attacks, hitting on 4, so you're looking at 9 hits. Well, okay. There's one die result if you're attacking something that's toughness 5. Now anything that's a 2 is going to wound that wouldn't have. And how many 2s are you looking at out of 9 hits? Roughly what, 1.5? And then you look at Drain Life. Drain Life 2 is 6 shots hitting on 4s, so you get 3 hits. Piercing 1, so against a defense 5 thing, you're also looking at 1.5. But unlike Banechant, which only has 2 dice, by the way, so there's a 75% chance to go off, 25% chance to fail. Drain Life gets more effective with weaker targets, and there's a lot more weaker targets out there than there are defense 6 targets. The only real, and it heals, which several times has come in kind of handy. The only real downside is it's only 6-inch range, where I think Banechant's 12. That does make a bit of a difference. But yeah, when I keep calculating, especially for goblins, there just aren't a lot of units that score lots of hits. A horde of rabble, that's 25 attacks hitting on 5s. So again, you're looking at 8 hits. Big deal. Now, yes, if you get that one clutch flank from anything, a troll or a rabble or something, that's great. But now you're relying on a couple things to happen for you. I'm looking for something a little more reliable, straightforward. As much as I try, I'm still not getting myself into position as often as I'd like to get flanks. Instead, I'm finding myself needing to smash through in a frontal confrontation. So the Banechant has kind of drifted, at least in this army, drifted from my focus, and instead Drain Life has kind of taken the forefront. And in my last game with the Brotherhood player, it was paying off pretty well. It's adding a few points to combat resolution, and unlike Banechant, if I really want, I can have 2 wizards cast on the same target, the same unit. You can't double up Banechant, but if I've got a troll horde charging into something that's kind of dangerous, I can throw 2 wizards into it and put even more wounds, and that's even more wounds I can heal off. It also helps, unlike Banechant, with other targets of opportunity. As the game's progressed, I'm noticing individuals start getting there's less cover for them. They start hanging out a little bit closer to my lines, or flyers or individuals are flying over my lines into the backfield. Now I've got a little bit more mobile firepower to either kill the standard bearers or healers that the enemy has near my lines, or hit the flyers and things that are jumping into my back. So it's been pretty successful. So I wanted to keep that in the army, because I like the idea of armies that frustrate the opponent by staying alive and grinding on and keeping scoring units going. One of the major things that has given me heartache in the past, or problems in the past, has been flyers, whether it's individuals or Drakon riders or large, flying hero monster things like dragons. And even now, speaking about my 2,000 point kind of list in mind, you can see where I don't have anything to really counter those. They could fly behind me. Okay, sure, I might drain life them once or twice, but that's not going to be enough. And goblins don't have the really powerful individuals, typically, that you could have with the Blade of the Beast Slayer or some other kind of artifact to give them enough attacks to attack and ground something like that, or hurt it significantly. So if I recall, I wanted to make a Goblin King on Chariot and maybe a couple of the Goblin Mega Blasters. And I thought I could have the Mega Blasters in the back. That will discourage flyers. And if they do go back there, between a Mega Blaster and then a couple of Drain Lives, some Lightning Bolts, maybe that's enough. But I didn't see any models I really liked. I mean, there's some good models for the Mega Blasters, Romantic, and there are Goblin Chariots out there, but I wanted something kind of, again, mechanical, steampunky, robotic, just a large wagon, really. I bought some little kid frontier wagon things from like a Cowboy and Indian set. There's a lot of work to convert, and I have no conversion skills, so those went by the wayside. So I didn't get to use the Goblin King on Chariot or the Mega Blasters. And then I come back from deployment, go to the hobby shop for and you can see it again in my last battle report, and it's like, all right, I brought every model I had. I had made a couple rock lobbers and war trombones just to make sure I had some variety so I could mix things up, but that wasn't the focus. But when they're going for a 2,400 point list to prepare for this tournament, I'm trying to throw everything together. It's like, well, okay, I'll put those in to bulk up my points. And I think I must have added another Maw Beast Regiment or Fleabag Rider. And that pretty much got me to the 2,400 point list, which is, again, the 3 hordes of trolls, the Draugr's goons, horde of spitters. So again, that's the meaty core. 2 regiments of Maw Beasts, 2 regiments of Fleabag Riders, 2 catapults, 3 war trombones, and an extra wizard. And this wizard I gave Alchemist's Curse to. Now suddenly, as I'm looking at it, again, because my opponent typically has a decent number of flyers with his Brotherhood list, suddenly I understand why Goblin players were taking some of these items, because it certainly discourages him from flying those people into my rear area for flank charges. You've got 3 war trombones, 2 drain lives, Alchemist's Curse, which in both of my games was devastating. I mean, it's just turn after turn after turn, and because individual, it's hard for the enemy to target them, especially his particular list. And he has individuals that could have tried to engage my wizard in melee, but then they would have been out of inspiring range, which makes the rest of their army more vulnerable. So both games, I don't know if I'd call that person the MVP, but Alchemist's Curse is pretty amazing. And I would recommend, if you don't have wizards that are super expensive and already have other missions, if you're just looking for a damage wizard, yeah, mine paid off in spades. I'm looking forward to seeing how well she performs in this particular tournament. Because yeah, my experience was great so far, and I know there are going to be Defense 6 things out there, whether it's Earth Elementals or Steel Behemoths or whatever. There's going to be a few of them, and they're going to be problematic for my army in some ways. So yeah, I'm hoping this will help quite a bit. And the rock lobbers, look, there's nothing wrong with them. Like I said, they can be hit or miss, which is why I didn't take 3. But I think 2, first of all, again, I had to just bulk up points somewhere. But 2 is good because it's enough to threaten the opponent. They can't take their time setting up perfect charges and perfect traps with their faster units, which a lot of armies are going to outspeed me. I've got 2 packs of Fleabag Riders, but don't hit very hard. So they have to sometimes force the issue. And you might note, too, I don't have a lot of chaff. I've never been a big fan of it. In some ways, I almost view it as just giving points away to the enemy. I mean, yeah, it's a tough call for me that you just throw something away to speed. But I understand it makes sense sometimes, but I don't like to make that a primary focus unless you have something very cheap. And I do. I have a couple things that are really cheap. But then the problem is sometimes the chaff is too vulnerable. Like if I got a troop, I think it is, yeah, troop of maw beasts at defense 3, they're just too easy to waver with just a couple shots, and they clog everything up. So I don't have much out in front of my list. Just the more efficient, larger units, efficient in terms of points invested for nerf and damage. So we'll see if that pays off for me. I've got lots of little shooting at range, 3 lightning bolts, and the horde of spitters. So hopefully I can pick away at enemy chaff. Again, waver them or wipe them out. So it's some free points for me. And if you look at it, oh, what I was to say also is that first game I did record, the more I thought about it, I didn't have Critter Call at the time. And I had 2 packs of maw beasts, 2 regiments. And I just kind of threw them away as chaff. And looking at the board, the battlefield at 2,400 points, my original thought was, okay, I got Fleabag Riders on the far flanks trying to work their way around. I have the core of my hordes in the middle, and the maw beasts can kind of be between the core troops and the flankers on the flank. They can kind of be in the middle ground, and they're, you know, speed 6, but they're nimble, so they can still move a little bit and try to angle for flank charges and things. There's no, at least, again, I've only got 2 games with the same opponent, but 2,400 points on the same size board is just, there's not a lot of room to maneuver around like that anymore. It's, the battlefield's flooded, so you can't get those opportunities. So now I'm looking at chaff. Well, so now they're looking at frontal charges, but they're yellow-bellied, and they don't hit that hard anymore, so they've got nerfed from hitting on 3s to hitting on 4s. And with defense 3, they're a juicy target to be shot at, so they really fit my needs. I don't want to, I've already got everything built and mounted, so I don't want to try to scramble at the last minute to try to make a regiment of them or something. And I'm looking at my army list and thinking, you know, Critter Call looks like a really clutch spell. One of the things my army is vulnerable to is alpha strikes or hard charges from things with Thunderous. And if I advance forward and press the issue, if I'm the one who has to get into range first and let the enemy charge me, instead of getting nuked, something like Critter Call can suddenly swing the game very quickly, because now my opponent has to make a weak charge, and then my counter charge between all the trolls and all the mincers and the drain life, my counter charges are pretty good, and that's kind of what I rely on. So I thought if my maw beasts aren't going to be flanking and killing as much, I do have a couple regiments of rabble I've put together. I don't want to swap them both out, so I swapped out 1 pack of maw beasts for a regiment of rabble. That freed up 20 points for Critter Call. Now I've got, if it's going to be chaff, 12-14 with defense 4 is much better than 12-14 defense 3. And that's tough enough. It's not chaff anymore. I mean, it can be used as such. It's not expensive, like 75 points. But it can hold things up. And in fact, the last game I played, which I didn't record, that unit got hit turn after turn after turn towards the end of the game. But because I had my 2 wizards nearby with the Banner of the Griffin and Inspiring, and then the healing, or their drain life, they'd get hit, they'd get wavered, I'd drain life the enemy and heal them back up. The enemy would hit them, damage them, I'd drain life and heal them back up. So they tied up a potential scoring enemy unit, and actually ended up allowing me to win the game by protecting my mincer that at the end of the game was holding objective. And that's something else. The mincers I've been very impressed with. Again, this particular army didn't have like catapults or a lot of mobile shooting to try to get around to the flanks. But with the Banner of the Griffin and this healing nearby, that defense 6 can be really tough for a lot of units. And not being yellow-bellied, they don't hit quite as hard. They don't hit very hard at all, really. Most of the charges, when they charge in to support a troll horde or something, they're only doing 2 wounds, maybe. I mean, it's kind of underwhelming. But those 2 wounds plus brutal, it adds up and swings combats. And again, you throw a drain life in there, suddenly you're kind of bumping things up. Brutal, 1 point there, a point or 2 from drain life. Suddenly, when you're doing the calculations as my opponent, and you're thinking, well, I'm going to charge into this troll horde. I'll take, 6 wounds? I can survive that. Now it's 6 wounds. Now it's 8 wounds from the mincer. Now it's 9 with brutal. Now it's 10 or 11 with the drain life thrown in. That's a very different story. And the drain life is relatively mobile. The mincers may have multiple charge lanes and options. And then you got to decide, do I charge the mincer? I can kill the mincer. It's a little easier to kill than the trolls. But the trolls are doing more hits. But if I hit the trolls, then the mincer's going to get thunderous again. They're going to charge back. So it opens up a lot of difficult decisions for opponents, which is good. And because they're scoring, I think both my games I've had mincers end up scoring and lasting to the end of the game, precisely because they're kind of hard to kill from the front. They're not super dangerous, so they're not a high priority to kill. And then by the end of the game, when there's very few units left, they're tough to kill as well, because what's left? Maybe like ash and trash. Again, I'm killing my opponent's most deadly weapons, deadly units, their hordes and things. So in this last game, it was a regiment of Brotherhood on foot. He had taken the formation Last Stand or whatever. So, okay, they're dash 17 nerve, they've got Iron Resolve, but it's just 12 attacks hitting on 3s with no crushing. That's not a problem for the mincer. They're just gonna plink away at the front, and if they do get an occasional wound or something, again, I've got Drain Life or the Healing Charm to heal it off. And yeah, they've got Iron Resolve, but the mincer's doing 2 or 3 wounds is gonna grind them down over time. And it did. Maybe it's some other kind of regiment. Even got Crushing 1, or even a horde of footmen or something. 25 attacks hitting on 4s. They're just not going to chew through those things quickly. So I've been impressed with those, and they're a good. And for 80 points, you can't beat them really. Now you'd think, or at least I thought, that with 26 unit strength points, and I think 13 units, I kind of assumed initially I'd have a strong advantage on objective-based missions, which was one of the kind of the points of trying to make an army originally that was focusing on just scoring units. Because there are goblins, I figured they're going to die fairly quickly, but if I can trade even 3 of my units for 2 of my opponents, if I can outlast them with scoring units, I should be able to win, because most games are objective based. My two test games with my Brotherhood opponent locally kind of played that out, but revealed again some of the problems I was not anticipating. Again, with 2,400 points, the board is very flooded. And when we played the scenario Raise, watching other battle reports, I thought, oh, I'll have an advantage here. I've got Fleabag Riders. I've got tons of units. So I can tie up my opponent and then my fleabag, at least one of my fleabag units, can just kind of run around the flank, get in the rear area, and just start raising objectives. Again, that doesn't happen because the board is pretty flooded, and melee takes place, and you can't let your opponent get too close to your board edge, so you have to move up, so then there's not a lot of room to maneuver, and you either have to keep your fleabag riders or fast units completely out of the fight, waiting for an opening to get through, and hoping an opening will get through for them, and hoping you'll win without their contribution, or you have to contribute them to the fight. And because they don't attack very hard, they're most of the time semi-sacrificial lambs. They're charging in to take thunders away from something. So the other thing is, because my army is in general slower than a lot of other armies, and again, maybe Brotherhood's not the best example with as many knight regiments and hordes as he had, but I had thought, I've got plenty of unit strength, so holding these objectives will be easy. Well, Ray's especially is tough because he doesn't have to hold them at the end of the game. He just has to hold them at the end of his turn, and he gets the points. And suddenly, that makes an alpha strike kind of strategy much more viable, because unless I really flood an objective with multiple units, and then they're all cluttered up so they can't maneuver very effectively. So if I have them spaced out appropriately, now I have to really think about it, but if I just have one unit on the objective, it's relatively easy for him to multi-charge with, let's say, 2 regiments. He kills the horde, and then even if there's another horde nearby, his 2 regiments have 1 more unit strength. He burns the objective down, and then, okay, who cares if I kill his regiments? He's got the objective. It's going to take me a couple turns to chew through him. Then I have to get past him to get to my objective. It was a complete opposite of how I expected the game to go. Also, flyers. Part of me is thinking, well, if that's the problem, I don't stand on the objective, I move past them. Plus, I'm trying to get to my objectives on his half of the board. But if I go too far, he has multiple units of flyers. So if I go past my objectives, he can just fly his flyers back there, land on them or near them, burns them, gets the points at the end of his turn, and then again, maybe I shoot them with my war trombones and spellcasters, but who cares? He's already got the victory points, and I still have to chew through his army to get to mine. So I'm not 100% sure what the solution to that's going to be. Maybe it's going to have to rely on more patience and, at least hold a group of fleabag riders back to wait for those openings to appear. Because with speed 10 and nimble, they could be back a ways, and anywhere an opening appears, they have a good chance to be able to run through. So I think, and again, this is, I have a theory. I haven't had a chance to put it to test, and I may end up having to put it to test at the tournament, which again is kind of crazy, but troubleshooting and working through the problem, I think that's going to be the solution to it. Because just a straight up grind fest, trying to work through to the enemy lines wasn't working. So I had to stop and get some gas, which of course disrupted my train of thought. Probably for the best. I wasn't writing notes and keeping notes as I was driving. But the 3 things that are on the top of my mind, I think must have been in line to be discussed, were, 1, I found, again, I didn't mention, I've got a mounted standard bearer, a standard bearer on a fleabag, and watching some other goblin videos, I gave him the diadem of dragonkind. So that gives me, between the 3 trombones, alchemist curse, and that, basically 5 breath weapons, which is pretty significant. And not only has it been effective in dissuading or punishing flyers to get to my rear area. I found even my trolls are not as tough as I'd hoped. And maybe that's, again, a feature or a symptom of it being a 2,400 point game list. There's just a lot of dangerous stuff out there, and things are getting smashed very quickly. But these units are flexible enough that if a hole does appear in my line, now I have options. Do I need to charge like a mincer or something in there to sacrifice and hold up for a turn? Or can I have a mincer go charge a different unit, and I can just have 2 trombones and Alchemist Curse blast whatever damage units remaining? They've been effective at that, and just like the wizards, I was talking a little bit about targeting individuals. The individuals have been a thorn in my side, and these also give a lot of flexibility and options in dealing with them. If units disappear, if the enemy has their individuals like with Inspiring kind of hanging out in the open, I suddenly have an option to hit them pretty hard. Not against a really tough, like a vampire lord or something, but a generic standard bearer or some kind of heal bot or something. A ward trombone to the face will do some significant damage to one of those things. And it's actually getting to the point where I so rarely targeted them. I always focused on the units. And in the last game or two, I've found it's like, especially with my wizard, especially with the Alchemist Curse wizard, I find that I've got a lot of opportunities where I could shoot a regiment or a unit that's hanging around, or a character. And I don't know, again, I usually am erring towards the units, but I'm thinking, if I target some of these Inspiring units right away, especially the cheap ones, the standard bearers and things, you hit them with a good Alchemist Curse and you get 4 wounds on him, that might be enough to kill somebody. And losing Inspiring, suddenly it helps me, or hinders my opponent quite a bit, because now it helps mitigate, the standard bearer, the Inspiring, helps mitigate swings of luck by making you re-roll maybe a lucky dice spike. You roll 10 or 11 on a nerve check. Yeah, re-roll that. It's hard to do it twice. But suddenly Inspiring goes away, and those lucky breaks are much more likely to go my way. I don't know if that's the more reliable thing, or if it's just pump wounds into units. And especially, again, my opponent I've been playing recently, he's got, I don't know what it's called, Devoted, some kind of healer with a artifact that increases his healing. So he's like at heal 6 or heal 7. And that was really, really countering a lot of my shooting and range stuff. And I get a rock lobber hit and a drain life off on his horde of Forsaken Knights. It's a lot of wounds, and then he gets a good heal roll and heals 5 of them back off. It's just turn after turn of his heal countering a lot of shooting. So maybe instead of shooting at the Forsaken from the start, at least with the wizards, the rock lobbers, sure, but the rest of the guys, maybe they start shooting at the Devoted guy, try to knock him out, stop the healing, and then it's a long-term investment. Interestingly, when I was looking at the 2,000 point list, and again I was trying to focus on scoring units, rock lobbers, even they're not as good, but the ballista sharp stick thrower or whatever, are certainly very points efficient for range damage. And while the game is kind of moving away from ranged, or trying to dissuade it, at least spamming it, I think it's still an important component of an army. It forces your opponent to act if you've got sufficient shooting. They can't just stand there and take it, or set up the perfect attack lanes if they're getting hit every turn. And it allows you, You can whittle away at multiple units so that your future melees are more successful, or you can focus fire and take out a particularly problematic unit. You can clear chaff so you can get the initial charge off. I think it's incredibly handy to have, and for armies that have any means of taking some shooting, they should. So one of the reasons I took the Spitter Horde was, hey, okay, these guys can provide some of that long-range fire, but they're still providing a horde, a 3-unit strength unit, and a lot of nerve. You know, they're only defense 3, but still, it'll take some chewing to get through them. Before I deployed, I had been playing around with my goblins a bit, and I had 1 or 2 hordes of spitters, and they did a lot of good work against my human opponent, salamander opponent. They would just sit there and pummel away at the slower enemies. My last couple of games, this Spitter Horde has not been performing as I had hoped. They don't get the good targets. There's a lot of cover, and maybe we're increasing the amount of cover we're using. Targets are moving around, and despite trying to set them up with the best lanes, I have to turn them. And actually, I found I'm shooting them a lot at individuals, which may be a little unusual in this case, but they don't have any other better targets. There's an individual with wings of the honey maze flying around. It's like, oh, well, I gotta stop this guy, and a few wounds is gonna help. So that's also one of the reasons I was looking at the Goblin King on Chariot. Nimble, 7 shots hitting on 4s. Not an incredible threat, but again, enough to kill chaff, enough to put a couple wounds on something every turn and make it a consequence for a unit or for an enemy not pressing forward and taking their time. Again, I want them to do disadvantageous charges, but the spitters are not working as well as I had hoped. And in fact, in some ways, I'm kind of brainstorming and thinking, well, what else could I use? In some ways, a rabble horde might have been better, or a rabble regiment or 2. The spitters aren't doing a huge amount of damage. Neither would rabble, obviously. And in fact, if their bigger job is to tie things up, this is just brainstorming, just throwing it out, just was considering it now. It sounds incredibly stupid, but what if you had like a rabble horde and you gave them the item, like the grenades you can throw? Now you could kind of move them in cover. They wouldn't have to charge every turn. They would never charge. Oh shoot, they can't, if they get charged or disrupted, they can't throw the grenades out. Ah, never mind. I thought I had a good idea. I was like, oh, they can get charged. Every turn the opponent's hindered, they're just chucking this stupid grenade artifact back. It might hit, it might not, but if the goal is just to tie people up. And actually, that's what, I had seen it before with another goblin, not many, but a couple of years ago, I was at the Bug Eater tournament with my Night Stalkers. And it was the first time I'd played goblins. And I see his little regiments. He had several regiments of rabble. I'm like, oh, okay, what the heck are these? They're not that dangerous. And I would just blow through them, right? And I'd charge in a horde of fiends. And the fiends would hit him hard. They'd do a lot of wounds. But with defense 4 and 12, 14 nerve, they can oftentimes survive a hit like that. And suddenly you're looking at a bunch of war trombones, giants, fleabag riders in the flanks. They've got long charge arcs. And I'm wondering if maybe maybe that needs to be the direction to go with this. Who knows? Maybe I'll do really well at the tournament and I'll think I'm doing great. But nothing in this army is very killy. Even the trolls, again, when you really break it down, you're probably looking at 18 attacks, 9 hits, and against a defense 5 target, which seems to be pretty common, you're talking 6 wounds. I mean, 6 wounds is it's just not that impressive. And that's probably, unless you go with maybe a colossal giant, or the mincer mob, that's probably the best you're going to get. And I considered the giants, and maybe I should cut some stuff and add 1 or 2 of them. The problem is, when I look at, you look at a regular giant compared to a troll horde, comparable price. The giant has fury built in and better nerve, but it doesn't have regeneration. So for survivability, they're pretty close. The giant's harder to alpha strike one shot, but the trolls are much more difficult to kill over time or grind down. The giant's 1 point faster. Strider and fury built in, although at least for a couple of the troll hordes, you can give them either fury or headstrong to kind of mitigate it. It still keeps them in the same price range. But ultimately, the giant's only worth 1 unit strength. The troll horde's worth 3. And the troll horde is hitting harder. What's a giant is D6 plus 6, hitting on 4s, crushing 3, I believe. So you're talking 6 or 7. No, D6 plus 6. So I get 9 or 10 hits on average, or 9 or 10 attacks. 4.5 to 5 hits, and then so it's going to be probably wounding on 2s. So 4 or 5. I think it's got brutal, which helps a bit, but it's again not a powerhouse as far as damage goes, especially from the front. So you look at it in raw terms. In some ways, my mind's thinking, it may as well just go with the trolls. They do a few more wounds, grind a little better, and are much better scoring. And if scoring is so important in this game, which it is, maybe that's the way to go. The colossal giant does hit a little harder, but I don't know. I have a hard time justifying them. In the mincer mob, while I love the idea, and it's kind of funny, and it would fit with my theme of lots of mechanical things, I've never been a big fan of Death Stars or Alpha Strike. Well, Alpha Strike's okay, but Death Stars are really, really expensive units. And this is not. It's only 220 points or so. But I think it's only 14, 16 nerve. I don't know. It's too... Especially at a 2,400 point list like this, I keep thinking most armies are going to have something that can hit this pretty hard and take it out right away. And then you're screwed. Now, one of the great things about Kings of War, and you can see it, at least on the registration list for this tournament, is that there's not only is there a wide variety of armies in the book that are available, but people take a wide variety of armies. I only played Warhammer Fantasy towards the end of its run, but if you went to a tournament, there were certain armies you just wouldn't see, especially if it was kind of a more competitive type tournament and not a more hobby focused one. This, looking at, I don't remember how many entrants there were, but there was a huge variety of armies. The good news is I know some of them fairly well. The bad news is our local shop is pretty small, so there's a lot of armies I don't have some experience with, and this game, all the little nuances make a big difference. So I'm comfortable with humans and Brotherhood, and I think I've got a leg up on those fights. That also kind of includes a League of Rordia. They're similar-ish. They've got a couple weird things here and there, like they're halflings. I haven't played against them, but okay, they're kind of like goblins with stealthy. So I think I can understand that. I'm pretty comfortable with elves of both types. And elves are interesting because their armies always look small. I always kind of underestimate them. It's like, oh, I got these guys. I outnumber them, but they're fast. They hit harder than you expect, just because of elite or vicious, and they're hitting on threes a lot of the time. So their small units are much more effective than my bigger units or my more numerous units. So it always catches me off guard. Dwarves, I'm pretty good with, and I think I can handle pretty well. The Berserker Brock Riders and Berserker Lord, those have always been troublesome for me. And really, in this army as well, I think I may struggle with those particular units because I don't have anything really good at taking them out. Again, you need something with a high number of, not only attacks, but a high number of hits. And there's just nothing in, certainly my army, but again, the Goblin army in general, that's just a real beat stick for that kind of thing. So, that's the one unit I'm kind of concerned about in the dwarf list. I've never played Abyssal Dwarves. And so I know I saw one or two in the registration, so I know it's going to be out there, and those are going to be problematic, I think, for me, because they're not like regular dwarves. They're very different, I think, and that's going to be an issue for me. I know Force of Nature pretty well, although the players I've played with, and I've played with them as a Force of Nature player, the lists I've seen and put together have not been like the lists I see online. So, and there's a decent amount of variability in that list. The one thing I'm worried about is I see a lot of lists take 2 or 3 of the big beasts with the lightning and vicious. And as I look at my army, and I think about what I was talking earlier about targeting individuals, I'm suddenly thinking, my inspiring assets are very weak, and if somebody has the means to target them effectively, I'm going to be in trouble. I've got an 8/10 wizard with the inspiring talisman, an 8/10 standard bearer on foot with the healing charm, and an 8/10 standard bearer on Fleabag with the breath of diadem, or the diadem of Dragonkind, or whatever. That's it. 3 sources of inspiring. Actually, I'm finding that's kind of even not enough for such a big list on such a big battlefield, but cluttered battlefield maybe. But they're weak, and for something that height 4 that might be able to shoot at them, even through cover, with lightning bolt and vicious, could be a problem for me. That's something I haven't run into, so I hadn't really considered it until just now, or recently, really. So we'll see if that actually ends up being an issue, like I'm afraid it could. What else? Night Stalkers. Night Stalkers was the first army I played seriously, so I'm pretty comfortable with them. I know them really well. My army it has a lot of shooting, but not a lot of range shooting. And as much as I love the Night Stalkers, theme-wise, modeling-wise, play-style and rules-wise, I don't think they're that. I think they're a weaker army, unfortunately. So I think I have the advantage against them regardless. And one of the interesting things, One of my favorite units in the Night Stalker list was the Planar Apparition. It's like a utility everything monster. It's heal 7, nimble, speed 7, I think it was. Regeneration 4, ensnare. It was awesome. And I rarely see anyone take it. I don't know why. It heals you. It can be a great roadblock because of its regeneration and ensnare. It's got okay nerve. And then because of speed 7 and nimble, it can also grab objectives and things. So it has 4 attacks. If you get some weird flank charge opportunity, you can throw an extra couple wounds into a critical melee. It's everything. So I don't know why no one takes it, because I loved it. I took usually 2 just to keep things alive. So regardless, I'm not too concerned about Night Stalkers. I have not played Varangur. I know they're a popular army and they're dangerous. I mean, they kill things that they touch. I'm hoping they're going to be kind of like the Brotherhood when I played them, in that, yes, when they charge, they will delete a unit of mine, but then I'll get to countercharge with multiple units of mine, and I'll swarm them. I'll trade 3 of my units for 2 of his, and my units are cheaper, so I've got more units to give up, so that's fine. And they don't have ranged, so that forces them to come in. And I think, and I could be crazy, but I think I have a large enough army with enough, no one's a hard hitter, but enough moderate hitters that against small elite armies, I think I have an edge. The problem is something like orcs, which I have never played. They are not as elite, but I think they still hit harder than my army. And they've got more units. And suddenly that becomes a problem for me because I can't wipe them out quickly, but I can't afford to just trade back and forth with them. So I'm slightly concerned about that matchup. I kind of put ogres in the same, they're kind of the mid-level, I think, between orcs and the Varangur. Kind of dangerous. Not as small and elite, maybe. It kind of depends how you build them. I've played them a little bit, but they can have a little variety too. And they've got a little more range. They start throwing in those warlocks. And that could be a problem for me as well, because I do have some weak little units running around that they can zap off the board. I wonder if we'll see the old school shooty army from hell with just tons of shooting. I think with the focus on objectives and some of the hindrances, the things discouraging shooting, I'm hoping that I'll avoid an enemy like that, because I think in some ways my army being slow may have difficulty with that. Although, maybe not. Between the 2 hordes of flea bags and the critter call, I may be able to shut down shooting for a turn. My guys have regeneration, so if it's just kind of plinking here and there, it may not be an issue. And I've got enough scoring units that I can play for the objectives, potentially. But I'm not as comfortable pressing the action. I'm more comfortable reacting to my opponent, which, coming from a military mindset, is the exact wrong thing. I'm supposed to dictate the tempo, and I press it and make my opponent react and make poor decisions. But for some reason in these war games, a lot of times I'm more comfortable the other way around. So I'm slightly concerned about that. And I mentioned that because I'm thinking of, obviously I know the Goblin army, so in some ways I'm not too concerned about them, but in other regards, that's one of those armies that traditionally can be very shooty. And if you come up against an army with, again, the 4 rock lobbers and a couple hordes of spitters and lightning bolts, lots of wizard spam, in some ways it becomes a a real gamble, because if the artillery's on, there's not too much you can do. A couple good rock hits on one unit could kill it right away before it gets a chance to regenerate. And that's what I found against, again, both my games with the Brotherhood player. He was pretty good about multi-charging and nuking my regenerating units before they could get a chance to regenerate. And I used my, not only that, but my healing charm a lot less than I thought I would, just because he was focusing on trying to prevent me. He wasn't going to grind, because he can't. He has to rely on Thunderous Charge. So maybe that won't be such an issue with other armies, but I was shocked how little I got to use that. So I don't know if that's a result of his list and his play style, if that's a result of, with 2,400 points, you've got a lot more toys to bring to bear on units to focus them down. So we'll see if that continues through, but it was a source of concern of mine. And again, bringing the thought of shooty armies as being a problem for me. My gut tells me if it's a very heavy shooty list, I could have issues with it. But everyone feels that way, and I'm pretty good about playing for the objective. I don't have any issue with, okay, I'm going to lose the fight. My opponent's going to wipe out most of my army, but as long as I get the objectives, I win. Even the last battle report I posted, okay, I sacrificed units to grab a loot token and just run away with it. I didn't stick around and fight. I didn't care. I just wanted to get the token and get out of there. So it may not be an issue. I saw that there were at least one Trident Realms player. That is also an army I'm concerned about. I've never faced them. Their rules are very weird. I mean, they're extremely different from other armies. And my army is already pretty mediocre at melee. Not a lot of hits. So with everything having a snare, suddenly that becomes an even greater issue. I don't have a lot of long-range shooting. I do have a lot of close-range stuff. So maybe that will help counteract it. I don't end up killing stuff with my melee units. I just blast them to death at close range. But then they also have, again, really weird, fast things like Speed 8 monsters that can charge in. They've got some pretty powerful shooting. But I have to get in close because they have regeneration. I can't just trade shots. I have to hit them hard, or else their regeneration is going to take an effect. So that's... And they've got, you're going to see...
In 2 miles, take exit 53 for Missouri 96.
Apologies for my automated navigator there chiming in. But yeah, what I was trying to say was, I don't have a lot of experience with opponents that manipulate my movement. So not only are Trident Realms strange in general, but the fact that I'm sure I'm going to see, Ector pushing people away, and then Sirens pulling people forward. I haven't ever had to deal with that. I've seen people play against it, so I have an idea at least about Wind Blast. Maybe you can put stuff behind your units so they can't be pushed, but it's not going to help against things being pulled out of line. And maybe that's not as big an issue as I think it is. Just to open up charge lanes and flank charges. It doesn't sound good to me. So that is something I'm a little concerned about as well. Ultimately, when you boil it all down, I think I'm pretty comfortable against small elite armies. I'll just flood the zone and overwhelm them, hopefully. Against kind of middle-of-the-road balanced armies, again, kind of the human template. I've got a little of everything and nothing's exceptional. I think I can have the advantage in those fights as well. The ones I'm worried about, orcs, maybe even salamanders, forces of nature, certain builds, things that are also grindy, do some damage. Maybe if they have lots of heal. Because again, I don't put out an incredible amount of wounds. So if I don't do a lot of damage and they've got enough healing to regenerate things, counter the few wounds I do inflict, I don't know how well of a counter to that I can provide. And also my inexperience against some of them, like orcs. I just don't know how that will operate. And in some ways, you might think that would also apply to dwarves. Dwarf armies usually have lots of tough units that are going to grind away. They don't have a lot of healing, but between earth elementals, usually defense 5, blocks of infantry, steel behemoths, all that kind of stuff, you would think that's going to be an issue. But I think because they're so slow, it makes it, and even if it's only 1 point of speed compared to some armies, I think that makes it a lot easier to deal with. You can swarm units, you can break them apart, you can stall one half and focus half on the other half. I do have a decent amount of crushing strength, so even though I don't do a lot of hits, a lot of them are going to be with crushing 2 or from the mincers with the equivalent of crushing 2 basically. I've got the rock lobbers, so I'm not too worried actually about defense 6 stuff. Alchemist Curse, those things usually are pretty expensive, so they almost are pushing it into the elite realm because they've got a few units that are going to be pretty pricey, and I have the tools to target a couple pretty pricey tough units. It's the bigger mob type armies where I just don't think I'm going to put out enough wounds. Just like what are they called, Ratkin. I've never faced them. I've seen some battle reports with them. They don't have a lot of high defense stuff, so some of my crushing may be wasted. I mean, a horde of trolls trying to cut its way through a horde of tunnel slaves is going to be a very, very sad day for me. And that's actually one of the reasons why I took Grogger's Goons instead of another horde of trolls. Not only are they a little bit cheaper, but they have many more attacks. And there's no crushing on them, but there are certain matchups, maybe against Defense 3 or the handful of Defense 2 things, where having more attacks and more hits is going to be beneficial. And they have slightly better nerve, and they're fearless. So that also kind of mitigates some of the major problems with the trolls. Anyway, this has been rambling for quite a while. Still got a ways to drive, but those are my overall thoughts. I think I'll do pretty well, above average. But ultimately, I haven't played enough to be at the top tiers. I think the veteran experienced players are going to pick me apart. And I think I'll do well among the filthy casuals like myself. I'll be the king of the JV maybe, but I won't be the varsity top tier dog. I do hope, again, I only saw one other goblin player, again, which is good. I think it's good to have variety in armies. Everyone wants to play different opponents, so hopefully, since there's a huge variety, everyone will have a good time. They'll get to face a different type of army for every round, and hopefully my modeling and painting emphasis will pay off, not just for my scores, but I mean, the battlefield always looks better when there's painted and neat looking models. So for me, going above and beyond quite a bit for me is hopefully will pay off and make the gaming experience better for everybody. Wish me luck. I'll probably post I may post an update at the end of the day, actually. Supposedly I have open gaming today, so I'm actually heading to the store that's hosting it. The tournament's actually at a hotel, but I'm heading to a store where they may have open gaming there. So maybe I can get a couple more practice games in before the real deal. So I may give some updates today to see kind of what I've learned. Otherwise, I'll definitely give one at the end of tomorrow, end of day one of the tournament. Thanks.